King Crimson is one of the most powerful stands in Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. With its main ability, King Crimson can avoid any and all harm you throw in its way, regardless of how powerful the attack is. Paired with Epitaph, which allows him to see into the future, King Crimson is almost impossible to defeat. I haven't even mentioned that Fate will kill or harm anyone Diavolo was fated to hurt, also making Diavolo a mini Wonder View in a way. He was so powerful that our main cast of characters had to find a Requiem arrow to increase their power to a large degree, and finally stand a chance against King Crimson, but not without a few losses. With King Crimson this formidable, what would happen if the entire Jojo universe tried to expose his identity at the same time? Can Diavolo and King Crimson take on all of them with ease? I'm obviously not going to include Gold Experience Requiem, just in case some of you try to be smart with me. So we all know Silver Chariot is a powerful stand. It can not only move at massively hypersonic speeds, enough to create after-image clones, but can also react to light speed attacks within point-blank range. Silver Chariot has done pretty well against enemy stand users it's come across, and has definitely gotten stronger over the years. Well, that didn't matter to King Crimson. Not only did Chariot's speed become irrelevant, but King Crimson proceeded to one-shot him effortlessly. Diavolo didn't even have to break a sweat. Chariot put up a better fight with Cream, meaning Diavolo at least scales above them in danger and power. Speaking of Cream, he never hit or tricked Diavolo even once with his Void ability. Epitaph would see the coming attacks, and Erase Time could simply phase through it. Diavolo would see eyes poking out his head and use the opportunity to donut his face. King Crimson has an A in destructive power and speed after all. He can easily punch holes through people and deflect point-blank bullet fire. Diavolo could have killed Bruno's squad whenever he wanted, but was more concerned with his face being revealed. That kinda shows that King Crimson is powerful enough to take on a bunch of stand users all on its own. But how would that fare against other close range power stands? Well, most of them wouldn't stand a chance. Every brawler type stand pretty much has the same range, so they need to get close to Diavolo to do any considerable damage. Diavolo would simply use Epitaph to see the coming attacks and use Time Erasure to avoid the damage. Most would be confused after the time skip, leaving them open for Diavolo's surprise attacks. The Hands Matter Erasing, Crazy Diamonds Restoration, Stone Freeze Strings, or D4C's Dimensional Hopping would be completely useless. If Valentine tried to jump to another dimension, Diavolo would simply witness it with Epitaph and turn him into a Valentine's Day donut before that ever happened. What about close range stands that inflict certain effects, such as Killer Queen's bombs and Tuskak 4? Well, since Diavolo is immune to any and all damage within Erase Time, getting hit by Killer Queen's bombs will likely just explode through him within Erase Time, leaving Diavolo unharmed, or he'd see the bombs with Epitaph and simply avoid them. The same thing likely applies to Bites to Dust. Tuskak 4 probably wouldn't be able to invade Erase Time, but if it could, it would likely only be to a small degree, similar to Diego's Stop Time. Diavolo would still see Tuskak 4's every action. He would see the infinite rotation inflicted on himself and simply avoid the stand. Let's say he does somehow get hit by the infinite rotation. Well then, he'd pretty much be screwed. Since it's infinite and follows you through time and space, it would affect Diavolo at all times, even within Time Erasure. If Johnny can get a Bushwati style surprise attack on Diavolo, which Act 4 is fully capable of doing, then it would pretty much be over for Diavolo. Diavolo would likely be immune to Green Baby's size manipulation within Erase Time, but Calamity would be an interesting situation. Diavolo would see the coming calamities, but I'm not sure he'd be able to fully avoid it. Sure, he's pretty much safe within Time Erasure, but Calamity is quick acting and random in nature, so the minute Diavolo exits King Crimson's ability, he will be hit by Calamity. Remember that it's still possible for him to get surprise attacked. Diavolo would never get to attack under review either, as Calamity would always protect them. The Go Beyond bubbles can cross through any boundaries and ignore the forces of Fate and Calamity. Since they don't exist, Time Erasure likely wouldn't recognize the bubbles and they'd invade the ability, but Diavolo would still see them with Epitaph and avoid the bubbles. The world in Star Platinum's time stop would be interesting. Only their users can exist within stop time, so Diavolo would likely only see the end result. I don't want to speculate on what would happen if they activated at the same time, or what would happen if time stop activated within Erase Time. Leaving that aside, I actually think King Crimson would still lose against both stands, but only really because their speed and precision would be enough to dodge King Crimson's boost ability attacks. Remote type stands are in the same boat. Not only would Epitaph see each and every one of their attacks, but he can also avoid all the damage. Notorious B.I.G. and Highway Star would be more of a nuisance than anything else, as they would keep coming at Diavolo regardless of how many times he activates his ability. If you try to trap Diavolo with his Superfly, he would simply use Time Erasure to leave the tower without any of the consequences that come with it. Cheap Trick would never get on Diavolo's back, as Diavolo would simply see the consequences at looking at a user's back, especially if you're acting strange, unless looking at a back in Epitaph counts. Stands that require certain actions to be activated would be useless. Epitaph would see the Darby Brothers soul stealing stands and simply cheat with his ability. Epitaph would also see Enigma and the activation criteria ahead of time. The real question is, would Diavolo see or avoid Lovers? It's so small that Diavolo wouldn't see it coming, and Steely Dan would now be immune to any and all attacks from Diavolo. Sethan can DH Diavolo to a previous point before he gained a stand, but it's unlikely he'd even be able to sneak attack Diavolo with his ability. There are measures some stands can take to keep Diavolo at bay. Magician's Red can surround itself with flames, or Purple Haze can fill an entire room with the virus, making it so Diavolo can never close in on the stands. Time Erasure deactivating will simply leave him vulnerable. This also applies to Grateful Dead's Agent Gas. The snail rainbows of heavy weather will definitely be a formidable ability to make it past, but remember the Time Erasure pretty much only contains little traces of the outside world, so he wouldn't be able to see the rainbows within his ability. He'd also see getting turned into a snail. So how would Diavolo do against his fellow main antagonists? Made in Heaven is a stand that can accelerate time to a massive degree and has infinite speed. Diavolo would unfortunately never find any opportunities to even hit Made in Heaven, as Made in Heaven would simply speed blitz past the boost ability strikes of King Crimson. This also applies to when Diavolo tries to blind Pushi. Made in Heaven will also shorten the window for Time Erasure, giving Diavolo less time to think of a battle plan overall. Pushi would donut Diavolo before he even ever got a chance to look at Epitaph again. With Love Train, both Diavolo and Valentine would be at a stalemate. Any damage Diavolo would do to Valentine would get redirected, and Valentine would never get to even hit Diavolo. Basically a non-stoppable force, meeting an immovable object. Now to answer the question, can King Crimson solo the entire Jojo universe? Well, no, but he can take on 85% of it and win. Especially since Fate would take care of most of his problems if he was fated to do it. However, there exists plenty of stands who are not only just as powerful, but are fully capable of working around Diavolo's ability. Despite this, the stand is incredibly powerful and should not be messed with. It's no wonder Gold Experience Requiem was needed to finish it off for good.